Hey South Metro, this is Kelsey Bailey, and we're here with Station 31 doing another cooking demo. I'm joined by Joe Carbonaro. Joe, what are we making today?
We're gonna make some Chicken Orzo Meatballs.
Excellent. So if you know Joe, you know Italian cooking is top on the list for them. So we're really gonna take his guidance too on making some special additions to the sauce and seasoning we do today. So first things first with this recipe, the longest part of it is going to be the chicken meatballs that take to bake. So we're gonna get those done and out of the way first. If you can hear a little fan in the background, that's our oven preheating as we get ready to go. All right, Joe, you ready?
Oh, sure am.
Let's start off. We'll get the chicken in there first. Okay. And we're using Redbird chicken from King Soopers. I really like this particular brand as it comes from a farm out of Inglewood, Colorado. So shopping local whenever we can is awesome. I'm the sous chef to the chef over here. And what I think about with protein is really the quality over the quantity. So instead of getting chicken breasts as big as your head, let's really focus on good quality of the nutrients that we're gonna get from them. All right, so next up we'll do a cup of Parmesan.
Coming up.
Excellent. And then a cup of panko. So if you've never cooked with panko before, it's simply breadcrumbs that we're looking at adding into the meatballs that gives the consistency to better stick together. Awesome. All right, next up we'll add the 2 eggs and then we'll go with our seasoning. So how long have you been cooking?
I've been cooking for a pretty long time, ever since I got hired on the department. My father wanted me to take over his restaurant, and I said, no thanks, I don't want to work for a living.
There you go.
So I want to do this as a hobby. Rather
you love your job, you never work a day in your life,
That's
right?
right?
Awesome. All right, so next we will do the seasoning. So keeping it super simple, with this recipe, we're doubling for the Firehouse tonight. So 1 teaspoon of each. So we have Italian seasoning, sea salt, garlic powder, and pepper. So nothing too crazy, everything's pretty standard, hopefully, in most homes for ingredients that we would integrate. Excellent. I can already tell this is gonna be good. When cooking at home, you can get creative on this too. If you like things to be a little spicier, you could add in some crushed red pepper into this. So don't always take a recipe exactly at its face value. Feel free to add and incorporate as you see fit, as your family likes. One of the options that you can easily do instead of panko, if you have any sort of gluten intolerance, is they have gluten-free breadcrumbs at the grocery store, just in the baking aisle. So you can also go that route if you need something that's a little bit more friendly for particular allergies. All right, Joe's got his gloves on, so I'm letting him dive in, but this is the fun part. If you have children at home, they get to mush the meatballs together. This is a really good sensory activity for them. Just make sure they don't put their hands in their mouth afterwards. I have a 2-year-old, and this is one of the favorite activities, is getting to dive in and play with the messy stuff. While Joe gets that prepared, I'm gonna get parchment paper on our baking sheet. This type of meatball, it can be done 2 different ways. So you can do it on the stovetop, whether in like a cast iron or in a skillet, or you can bake them. I personally like the baking option because it allows me to not have to watch the stove as closely throughout the cooking process, and retains a little bit more of the moisture within the meatball. However, you can do whatever works for your life or your situation. All right. So we're just putting some parchment paper down so it does not stick when we put into the oven. And the oven's set at 400 degrees and we'll be cooking for 25 to 30 minutes. So as with any meat that you're cooking, just make sure you're temping things appropriately. Cooked chicken should be right around 165. Note when it comes out, it may cook a little bit longer if you're keeping it on the hot surface. So if you keep it on that hot pan, it'll likely increase a few degrees. So if you don't want your cooked chicken way overcooked, you make sure you're temping right around that 160-ish mark. Awesome. All right, we can assemble. So you know your team better, so you can size everything out the way you want.
Okay. Nice and big.
Perfect. So adding into this dish as well, the next portion that we'll do is our vegetable side of the house. The recipe itself calls for red pepper, but we're gonna add in a little bit more depth of flavor to that, mainly because I'm working with Joe and I feel intimidated by not bringing in enough flavor. No, so we'll add in an onion, garlic, and extra greens within this particular recipe. One good rule of thumb I have for pretty much all dishes that we make for dinner, lunches that you're bringing in, is to try and get 2 colors of vegetables at each meal. So if we have red, can we get green? If we have white, can we get purple? In this particular dish, we'll have 3. So we have the onion, the red peppers, and the kale that will bring in different colors into our meal. It's an easy way to also hide vegetables if you have picky eaters or children at home. If you chop up the greens really fine, those can be great to add in to a pasta sauce since it takes up a lot of the flavor. On the meatballs, on the size that you want to determine, we'll just monitor the cooking time. So same goal, want to get it to right around that 160, 162, depending on how quickly you're taking it off of that hot pan again. All right, so on protein choices for this particular recipe, we chose chicken just for its lean option. There's a lot of different ways you could go with this. From a ground beef perspective or Italian sausage perspective, I would typically do like a half and half situation with meatballs like this to get in that extra flavor. All depends on what type of protein we're looking at for the week. Normally with red meat, I usually recommend no more than 2 or 3 times a week as we alternate with other lean sources of protein as well. Great. All right, so now this goes right into the oven, 400 degrees. Again, that 25-minute mark is where we'll check them and see what temp they're at. All right, so next we're going to go into the vegetable chopping side of this recipe. So we're going to start off with 3 bell peppers that will be going into our sauce. Big things to remember on any sort of vegetable chopping is use a sharp knife. If you're using a dull knife to chop, the likelihood of cutting a finger is way higher, and it's way more unpleasant to chop because it takes a lot longer. After that, making sure you use a little bear claw so you don't cut any fingertips can also be very, very helpful as a good tip and tool of the trade. Joe has perfect knife technique, so a good pinch at the top of the blade, and you'll notice that the tip of the blade stays down on the cutting board as he chops along that pepper. This allows for way more control over the chopping. As you can imagine, if we have a finger on top, as many people like to do, we lose a lot of the control over the knife. So this keeps everything low and controlled, and it allows for a lot more speed in chopping as well. A lot of folks don't like to chop vegetables because of the time it takes. So as you improve little skills like that, it can be very, very helpful in making that process way less painful in the cooking and meal prep department. So who is a faster chopper, you or your dad?
Oh, my dad by far. I mean, you couldn't even see the blade. I mean, it's so fast.
It's amazing, and then they don't even look. Chop, chop, chop. It comes second nature. All right, next up we have 4 cloves of garlic. All right. So this will add a little bit more depth of flavor. I always like to use herbs and different seasonings within our cooking. So garlic is a great way to add good depth of flavor. Just know with the amount that you add, you might be affecting people's breath for the rest of the night. So,
so everyone's got to have garlic, not just one person.
Yeah, exactly.
One person has
all
garlic.
or none.
Yep, exactly.
Yep, we'll dice the garlic. A pro tip with garlic as well, if you don't like chopping garlic, it feels messy. I often use a cheese grater or a microplane right over a dish, and that gets it nice and finely chopped. Joe here's a professional though.
And if you get garlic smell on your fingers, the best way to get it off is by grabbing, not so much this knife, but like a stainless steel knife, and just as you wash it, just use your fingers. Don't go over the blade, obviously, but just kind of rub it along the stainless steel and it'll come right out.
When chopping things that are smaller, you'll notice that Joe's putting his fingers on the tip of that blade. So with herbs or really small things that we're chopping, this can be helpful, again, for that added control so it's not rolling all over your cutting board. We're utilizing just plain tomato sauce in this particular recipe. So we want to be able to add in as much flavor as we can through the additions. This is likely sacrilege in saying this, but if you don't want to make your own sauce and you're looking at different store-bought options, I try to be cognizant of the amount of added sugar that are in different pasta sauces because it can get quite high in some. So one of my favorites is Rao's that doesn't have any additional added sugar. But just be cognizant of looking on the back side of the label and see what the content is within there.
All right, I think we're set.
Excellent. All right, last but not least is the onion. If we want to clear out our cutting board, I'll bring the pan over. We can start transferring this to here. Not on, not hot yet, just transferring our raw ingredients over.
There we go.
Excellent. Last but not least, the onion. My least favorite to cut.
So you don't want to go all the way through the onion. Just maybe stop about 7/8 of the way through. So now you can just kind of roll it back. And now you can kind of peel it. Just diced up.
Yep, we're just gonna dice the onion. You can also use a chopper at home with these if you like a chopper. I have a little lawnmower type of chopper for onions since I'm susceptible to a lot of the crying. So what's the biggest staple or thing you like to remember in Italian cooking?
Well, with any kind of cooking, even Italian cooking, if something lacks in flavor, just add a little bit of salt or citrus and get some good flavor.
Such a good rule of thumb. So adding in whether your herbs, your seasonings, your salt, and people get hung up on adding too much sodium within their diet. However, if you're active individuals, adding in sodium is a phenomenal way to get extra electrolytes within your day without having to add a lot of powders. Most people's salt needs are way higher than they think they are, especially in Colorado when we have such a semi-arid climate. What I find when people are experiencing that afternoon slump and they're wanting to reach for coffee, typically it's a lack of fluid balance. So adding in a beverage with some electrolytes or having a snack that has some salt can be really helpful, and adding some fluid within that snack. Get some more energy in the afternoon.
You want to dice up more? Or is that
Nope,
good?
that's perfect. So now we're transferring over to the pan. All right, so we're moving over to the stove. We're gonna start making our sauce. So we have the garlic and peppers that are already in there. We're gonna add some olive oil just right over the top, drizzle on at least a tablespoon if you like to measure. This is one area where I rarely measure in cooking and just go with what feels right on the amount of olive oil to add. We'll add in our chopped onions, and this will saute for about 5 or 10 minutes until the onions are translucent. While that's cooking, we're gonna start our orzo pasta on this side. This is a little bit of a deference from the recipe if you find the recipe online, which we will be sharing through the South Metro distro. The recipes are all held in a Google Sheets. So just note on this particular recipe, we're taking a little veer on the orzo side of the house. So we're gonna put in the raw pasta just right into the bowl. If there are any food allergies, again, gluten intolerance, there are chickpea versions of orzo that exist out there that can be utilized. Those will have a little bit of a higher protein content, a little bit higher of a fiber content as well. You can either cook orzo pasta with plain water, which it will absorb, or we are going to cook today with chicken bone broth. The point of that being is there's extra protein within the chicken bone broth. We'll get good electrolytes from there as well. Bone broth specifically is high in amino acids called proline and glycine, which are 2 amino acids that make up the contents of our tendon and ligaments. These are important because if you have chronic tendon and ligament pain, consuming things like bone broth, gelatin, collagen peptides can be very, very helpful in managing some chronic tendon pain. So tendinitis, ligaments, if you're prone to getting injured in those areas or have just chronic wear and tear from the job over the years, this is great to incorporate in your day-to-day life to help alleviate some of that pain and strengthen the tendon. So we've got our raw pasta in here, and we'll just add in this full quart of chicken bone broth. And we'll get this cooking. Orzo is a tiny pasta, so it cooks really quickly. So something good to keep an eye on. Some folks like their pasta al dente, so if you are that person, keep an eye closer to that 5 or 6 minute mark. If you like it to be a little bit softer, then we can go closer to that 7-minute mark on the pasta. Got it going over medium-high heat. Our onions and garlic and peppers are looking awesome on this other side for our sauce. And once our meatballs are done, again, we've mentioned bringing them out a little bit before they're fully temped up to that 165. We will be adding them directly into this pan, so they also get covered in sauce, and they'll likely cook a few degrees in there as well. So just keep that in mind if you don't want really over-dry meat. All right, next step on our sauce is going to be adding a few seasonings in before we add in our tomato sauce. So Joe's adding in a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, and we're gonna add in a teaspoon of salt. The teaspoon of salt is to taste. So if you want a little bit more, taste your sauce once it's cooking. Don't burn your tongue. But if you'd like a little bit more salt in there, absolutely go ahead and add it into the sauce. All right, chicken meatballs just went off, so we're going to check the temp on those. Again, fully cooked poultry is right about 165. Just a hair bit longer on the chicken meatballs. We're at about 147. All right, going back to our sauce, we're going to add in the tomato sauce first. So we're doing 2 cans of just plain tomato sauce. Again, if you're not making your own sauce at home, this next step would just be putting your own store-bought pasta sauce within the sauce.
Smelling good.
Yeah, one of the secret ingredients in this sauce are capers. Oftentimes people can have a hard time finding them in the grocery store. So wherever there's other pickles is where you'll find all the other pickled vegetables, and capers are pickled. So we're gonna bring those in about a half a cup into the sauce that we're making. Not everybody loves capers, they're quite salty. So if you have picky eaters in your home, this is one part of the sauce you can omit. I would recommend adding in a little bit more on the Italian seasoning side if you're going to do that, just to make sure the sauce flavor is robust enough. Excellent. So now that our vegetables are fully cooked within this sauce and we've added in our tomato sauce and capers, we're going to let this simmer while we bring everything else to temp and to a boil over here. The meatballs, once they are finished, will be added right into the sauce, so they also get the full flavor of that as well. If you're like me and you love capers, that can also be something you can top your dish with as well on the side. So if you have picky eaters, that's a good way to also incorporate it if you yourself still like them in the dish. All right, so our chicken meatball timer just went off, so we're gonna check them again. Should be ready. They look good and golden brown on top.
Good?
Yeah, those are good. And we'll put those into our sauce. Our orzo is cooking really nicely in here. You can see that it's absorbing the liquid nicely. We'll let this go for 3 to 4 more minutes as it thickens up, but coming along nicely. While the orzo is finishing up and our sauce is simmering nicely with the chicken meatballs, we're gonna do one last step added into the sauce. So I'm gonna rough chop some baby kale, and we're gonna put that in there so we get our multiple colors of different vegetables. Kale is really easy, or even spinach is easy to add in last into any sort of pasta sauce that you're cooking because it wilts very, very quickly, absorbs the flavor of the sauce really nicely. And can be a great way to sneak in extra vegetables for children as well. So we just have our baby kale, just took an overflowing handful. Again, this is a modification to the recipe to add in more vegetables. So we'll just do a quick rough chop, doesn't need to be perfect. Again, any sort of green that you'll add will wilt really nicely. You don't even necessarily need to chop it if you don't want to, because greens, as they simmer down, get very, very small. So just if you have picky eaters, you can chop it into smaller bits as well. So we're going to take the heat off of our orzo. It's all ready to go. Excellent. We'll let the kale wilt down within there, and then we'll finish with our final toppings. All right, so we're bringing our finished orzo and finished chicken meatballs back to our station, and we're going to give the final touches to both. So with the orzo, we're going to actually add in a creamier element. So we have goat cheese crumbles and mascarpone cheese to add in. You could do cream cheese, you could do butter and Parmesan, whatever you prefer. We're going to do a mix of the two of these per Joe's recommendation, and actually this is my favorite combo as well. So I'll let you get 1/4 of a cup of the goat cheese, and this gives a very, very rich, savory element to this dish without adding a ton of butter, fat, whatever you might imagine. It also really ups the savory factor. I'm a huge fan of enjoying the heck out of something that is a richer dish. You usually want less of it when we have that because it's so satisfying with a smaller portion size. With any carbohydrate that we're adding into a meal, we'll adjust portion size for it based off of your training day. So if you're having a lighter training day, you're about at 3/4 of a fist of your size of fist, not mine. And if you have a heavier training day, you're doing 60 to 90 minutes, then we would look closer to 1 1/4 fist worth of carbohydrate in the meal time for you. So just know that you can adjust accordingly based off of what type of training day you're gonna have. So add in the second type of cheese, and feel free to season accordingly on your orzo as you wish. So if you'd like to add in some black pepper or salt, fresh basil, fresh parsley, to really elevate the flavor with any sort of herbs or spices, please feel free to do that as well. Oh yeah, that's the good stuff. And we'll get this all mixed in and we'll get a nice creamy orzo side. Last but not least, we're gonna add the final touches for our meatballs. We're gonna add fresh basil on top. I love finishing dishes with a fresh herb. It really adds a nice aromatic element to the dish. And with basil, the easiest way to chop is just roll it up and get after it. The proper Italian way, however, is to tear basil, I learned today. So take that note home. So final touches to our dish, adding a little color, adding a little flavor. The basil smells amazing. And we are ready to plate. So we'll get our dishes to show you how to plate the final dish. Last but not least, we have to plate our nice meal. So we'll start off with the orzo. Remember, adjust your portion size on carbohydrate based off of what type of training day you're having. We're gonna start with about a 3/4 of a fist on this one. Excellent, and we'll add on top our meatballs. We did about 2 pounds of chicken within this. So in looking at majority of folks, majority of men, I should say, around like that 180 to 200 pound individual is going to be anywhere from like 6 to 8 ounces of meat per meal. For active individuals, if we're lighter than that, you weigh less than that, your needs are going to be a little bit closer to that 5 to 7 mark, so you can adjust accordingly on the protein there. And then we have our toppers, so you can add extra basil if you'd like, and extra Parmesan on top if you'd like as well. So we'll have Joe give it a good sprinkle. Gorgeous. Restaurant quality.
Yeah, looks great. It's really good.
Well, I'm sure people are excited to dive in and eat, so thank you for watching and join us next time.